Hey everyone, Sparrow here. I hope you're ready for a long one because today I am attempting to really challenge myself to build not only a habitat but also a delivery tunnel to the enclosure, a multi-story building, and a pathway that is neither straight nor flat. If you've been following along with True North, you might remember one of my goals for this section is to avoid straight paths and rectangular enclosures, instead playing with different elevations to provide a more natural, immersive experience. And if you're new here, hello! Welcome to what I think is the best build so far. But to be fair, I think each new addition to the True North Sanctuary is the best so far, so that's actually a good sign because it means that I feel like I'm getting better at this. This path definitely didn't feel like as big of a struggle as usual. I turned tunneling on to get it to pop through the ground and up to the height of the backstage area here. Had to do some minor terraforming to make sure there were no bubbles in the path, but it was surprisingly painless this time around. This is how our animals will make it to their enclosure in the real world. In Planet Zoo, our poor zookeepers are going to just carry a 250 kilogram animal down the stairs and through the habitat gate. Just whipping up a concrete slab to check the height of the tunnel. I wanted it at least 4 meters, which I think is what ends up on the clearance sign by the end of the video, so I had to push the ground up to make sure the tunnel is tall enough for trucks to get in and out. I did find that being in explore mode and moving along the path helped keep the camera movements a little easier to follow, but my claustrophobia still didn't quite like it. So we're gonna skip ahead to the concrete portion of the tunnel, which is something I didn't show in the moose and beaver video. They have a similar but much shorter tunnel to their habitat as well. Using the handy advanced movement tools to make sure the slabs are aligned against each other and the curb of the path, first one side and then the other. This honestly didn't feel as boring as I thought it would. It was strangely meditative. It's a pretty simple repetitive task and I actually quite enjoy those, so this was nice. For the ceiling, I just put down the gridded concrete floor pieces because ultimately it doesn't matter if they line up completely with the walls, they just need to cover the top of the tunnel. Push the earth up and out of the way to make sure all parts of the ceiling were filled. There was one portion that was slanted, so this section I just aligned a panel to the road surface and lifted it to match the height of the other slabs. Once the first panel was in place, once again used the trusty advanced movement tool to fill in the gaps and make sure the ceiling is nice and solid and the earth isn't going to cave in. That's basically it for the tunnel. The walls will later get some lights, but that's a quick job for the position snap tool. The massive building over here is going to house the grizzly bears and another future animals backstage areas on the bottom floor, a massive staircase for our keepers to get down to the basement, and also some food shops on the ground level so guests have a pit stop between the prairie pathway and the mountain hike areas. Having somewhat learned from my mistakes with last week's 2-story building behind the Timberwolf habitat, I made sure to place the more finicky parts like the paths and the shops early, while things like backstage fences and counters that are off the grid could be added afterwards because they don't glow red and show the annoying obstructed message even when there are no obstructions. Also, quick shout out to Viking Ironside who tipped me off that the staircases look better with the square edges, so I made sure of that with this staircase. Here are our food shops going in, super simple. Sticking with the idea of placing the annoying parts first, the guest path went in next. I planned this path to be above the habitat because it has to go over the delivery tunnel. I also wanted it to be somewhat curving and flowing, kind of like a river, because this pathway is actually going to be called the Salmon Run, and that's because salmon are a big source of food for grizzly bears, especially in British Columbia, Canada, which is likely where our bear is from. Just another educational aspect for guests, and we'll be adding some fun decals later in the video that I'm very excited to show you. The terrain work for this habitat was largely making sure the ground wasn't too sloped and had a nice rolling hill feel to it in the center, with some portions higher up and closer to the path on the edges. But not too close obviously because we don't want our bear climbing out. I also dug a small cave into the left side so that the bear would have an additional place to hide if necessary. And then, of course, put in our barriers, which with all of the elevation changes were quite annoying. The part right by the delivery tunnel just wouldn't work for some reason and kept saying the terrain was too uneven, which true it is, but I had the fence set to flat top and editable bottom, so it should have worked. Eventually just redid parts of the barrier and that seemed to work. To make sure the bear was safely enclosed and to give the enclosure more of a mountain valley feel, as well as to support the pathway, lots of rocks, which isn't too different from my usual building style. They add so much dimension to a habitat. The rocks will also cover the delivery tunnel, so guests don't have to look at all of that ugly concrete. Though I will say it was quite annoying to make sure that none of the rocks were poking through into the tunnel, but it's all in the name of aesthetics. Also, you may have seen me check the traversable terrain, which means our grizzly bear has arrived. There will be only one grizzly in this habitat, not because there's not enough room for more. We could technically have another adult and a cub in here if we wanted to, but grizzly bears are largely solitary other than during the breeding season, and since I wanted a male grizzly bear, it just worked out that he gets this massive habitat all to himself. The way I imagine True North Sanctuary, it is very much about taking in animals that can't survive in the wild or maybe need to be rehabilitated before being reintroduced into their natural environment. So I imagine the story with our grizzly bear is that perhaps he was wounded by some idiot who was carrying a gun in a national park, which, by the way, happened recently in Alberta and is very illegal, and so had to be put into the sanctuary's care. Luckily, our grizzly survived the bullet and he is thriving. I did plan this enclosure on the same camping trip as the Timberwolf habitat, so I happened to be in a national park while doing that, Waterton National Park to be specific. And we did a bunch there, visited the village and walked along the lake, saw some waterfalls, and then also learned that Castle Mountain, which is a ski resort nearby, hosts a festival in the summer called Huckleberry Fest. So we being my fiance and I, checked it out. There was a plenty of food, vendors, local breweries, live music, not a single huckleberry flavored thing, mind you. And it's while we were here that I noticed there were warning signs for bears, which makes sense because grizzlies would stick close to the Rockies in Alberta and they do love their berries. And it was actually my fiance who suggested that I name the grizzly in True North Huckle, and the name just stuck immediately. Especially with the backstory on how it came about, I think it's just so cute and it fits our grizzly so well. So that's it, Huckle the grizzly bear. Doubly awesome because Huckleberry, Huckle the bear. In case you hadn't already guessed from my video titles, I love puns and song references, so here's another one to add to the collection. For the building, since it is right on the edge of the mountain hike, I wanted these sidewalls to kind of be reminiscent of mountains, so I had them sloping downwards. This is a much toned down version of the initial ones I tried, but mixing up the 1 meter and 2 meter slopes made roofing really hard, and I already am not the greatest at roofs, so the simple slope won. I do think this building has some interesting features and isn't just a complete brick, which is what I was worried about since it is about 12 meters tall. But with a little bit of sectioning and having roofs sloping at different angles in different directions, it came together into quite a nice looking structure, I think. Before the building gets finished, though, I decided the habitat and our grizzly bear needed some love. So some enrichment items. I did remember to use the path trick in some places this time around. If you don't already know what that is, some enrichment items will flatten the terrain, and then it's quite annoying to fix it, especially if you had already terraformed things to your liking. So what you can do is place a piece of path down and then place the enrichment item on top of it. Because terrain can't be terraformed around paths, the enrichment item doesn't flatten anything, and then you just have to delete the path and you're done. Super simple, super easy, good time saver. Just like this grass trick, group them together, align to surface, and then sink down slightly into the terrain. I didn't want this enclosure to feel too overgrown, it's still very much rocky territory, but I did like the mountain valley feel. So some low-growing bushes, plenty of undergrowth in the corners, especially to hide parts of the rock wall where I didn't do a great job of rotating the rocks so they don't all look the same. Oops. One thing I think Planet Zoo is sorely missing are more mountainous plants. And by that I mean plants that grow at really high elevations, like over 8,000 feet above sea level. In the Rocky Mountains, as you climb higher, it obviously gets colder and the vegetation thins out, and you're left with lots of low-growing things like sedum and phlox and juniper and potentilla, none of which are plants that we have in the game. Even something like chokecherry would be nice. Those are plentiful in the mountains. Potentilla or cinquefoil, which to me looks like it should be pronounced cinquefoil because it obviously comes from French. But anyway, it's a plant from the rose family with these yellow 5-petaled flowers, and it grows in a massive range of elevation changes, anywhere from about 2,500 to 13,000 feet. That's incredible. And though I might be mistaken here, I believe it's one of the only shrubs that still flowers at a high elevation, which takes a lot of energy on the plant's part. They're very good looking plants too. I wouldn't mind having some of them in my zoo. So if we get a Highlands or Mountains DLC, I am keeping my fingers crossed for some of these iconic high elevation plants. For the trees in this enclosure, I was trying to be very careful with the traversable terrain because I wanted our bear to have as much room to roam as possible. And I also was frequently checking the sightlines from the pathway into the enclosure. I did break up the viewing area a bit with a nice conifer and overall stuck with the same palette of trees as in previous enclosures. Douglas firs, ponderosa pines, black spruce, aspens, and also threw in a small sugar maple for some color in this habitat. Going to break up the viewing area further with a rock feature. That's another thing we're working on at True North Sanctuary, multiple viewing areas. I figured these rocks would have some educational signage on them or something, though I am coming to realize that not everything needs to necessarily have a purpose. Sometimes it is just there to look nice, and that is its purpose. It doesn't need anything more. So maybe this will just be a natural formation, and that's it. Another finishing touch to the enclosure, adding fallen trees and branches to make the habitat feel more lived in and wild. This is a step I usually forget until right before the tour, so I'm frantically adding tree trunks and little groups of branches all over the place before filming those. But not this time. This time I remembered, and it's nice that I can just steal piles of twigs from other enclosures now. This fallen leaf trick is another recent addition to my arsenal of finishing up habitats. Especially if you're using the more colorful trees like the maples or aspens, I find adding these leaves around them helps to situate them in their environment because it's very likely that there would be a bunch of leaf litter at their base, even from years past. It probably wouldn't be that vibrant, but I can't imagine zookeepers are coming in here and raking them all up. Though that would be super cute to see. Imagine a grizzly bear just playing in piles of leaves. Finally, onto fences. This is where I began regretting my decision to make a curving descending path. I realized that I had to rotate the fences to fit the curb and also the elevation. So while I started with the regular duplicate option, which I've noticed a lot of creators use because it is a lot more efficient, I couldn't quite make it work with the elevation changes, so I went back to my trusty advanced duplicate tool. And then I decided I hated myself and that I just had to cover up the curb of the path. In a game with so many options, I really don't understand why we don't have the option to choose curbs, railings, and path surfaces separate of each other. Like, why are they always a package deal? But despite hours of work, I do really love how this path ended up looking. For the roof, I decided I was going to match the colors of the pathway in front of the shops. So what I did was take a screenshot of the pathway, opened it in Photoshop, and used the color picker to grab hex codes that I then used to recolor the painted slate. It's a little bit of a mottled, dappled effect, I guess you can say, but I do quite like it. Something different from the browns and beiges of the rest of the zoo so far. Here we finally are arriving at some of the finishing details. So remember how I mentioned the decals for the salmon run earlier? I decided I was going to create my own because, well, there are no fish stickers in-game, and I really just couldn't pass up this educational opportunity. So I placed a screen down, and I do apologize for how bright the image is, put a picture of a sockeye salmon on it, and then used the full stop and comma font pieces to outline it. I did make each color its own layer just to make it easier to put together. So we have the pink of the body, the white underbelly, the brownish gray-green fins and tail, and the green head. This whole process really didn't take as long as I thought it would. I will definitely be using the screen trick in the future to create other educational items, or even other items like fences if I draw them out beforehand, for example. So why sockeye salmon specifically? While salmon in general are a staple of the grizzly bear diet, sockeye are just one of the most distinctive species of Pacific salmon because of their bright colors. So in short, the answer is pretty colors make for a more interesting display. For the bears, sockeye salmon is a great high-calorie meal because one sockeye is about 4,500 calories. However, bears still need to eat about 30 to 40 of them per day, so that's a lot of salmon. Another interesting fact about bears and their feeding habits is that during seasons where food is plentiful, bears will actually do something called high grading, where they only consume high-grade fat. So they won't eat the whole fish, they will actually eat only the fattiest parts, which also happen to be the parts that provide the most calories. This includes the skin, brain, and eggs. When fish aren't as abundant, the bears aren't as picky and will just eat the whole fish. But it's kind of cool that they can afford to eat only the finer parts of the fish, I guess you could say, in times of plenty. And since we're talking about salmon runs and grizzly bears, I was suddenly reminded of Brother Bear, which is a movie I haven't thought about in a long time. But if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. You will laugh and you'll probably cry, but it's a sweet movie if you love animals. Once the salmon has been put together, it's time to put it all over the salmon run pathway. Some finishing touches. I don't believe I included a montage in my last video, so here's a super short one. Plenty of garden beds all around and lighting everywhere. Just look at that big, beautiful moon hanging just over the roofline. Alright, so we're going to start today's tour with some of the guest amenities that were put in. So we have some food and drink shops over here with a nice garden bed featuring some bison statues, seeing as the bison enclosure is actually right behind us over here. So I thought it was a nice divider between these two sections. This side of the building here has nothing in it, so we'll probably finish that up whenever we do the habitat that is on the other side of this. Maybe have like a little rooftop garden on the side there, or like hide something in here. Oh, an art gallery might be fun. Maybe we'll do that. So yeah. Here is the pathway that I stole colors from for the roof. And I did take a bunch of things off of the workshop, so we're just gonna walk up. Oh, we can't. That's okay. Hold on. You can kind of see it from here. So yeah, you can see all the fridges and ranges and shelves that I put back there. There's some pizza ovens, some really cool stuff off of the workshop. You can find that in the workshop collection I have linked below. None of the billboards are done either. I just did not have the time. I think that might be something that happens before the final tour. This signage, however, I did have time to do because this has been laying around for a while. So down the mountain hike, we now have a sign for owls and a salmon sign for the salmon run. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. First, we're going to try going into the backstage area. So we have this big staircase that we need to go all the way down in order to get to the backstage. But because it is a stacked staircase on top of each other, it doesn't like to work. So we're just going to have to pop down like so. So yeah, here is the keeper door into the grizzly habitat. Here is the grizzly kennel, I guess you can call it. And then we do have a little kitchen off to the side here. So we have a fridge, and then the countertops and sinks from previous builds. Also added a little bit of track lighting in here. And behind this wall here is a keeper hut, which is the reason why we can't walk down the stairs. But yeah. And then over here we have access to the delivery tunnel. So a double door for keepers and then to deliver the animal. And then this is how we get into the delivery tunnel. So yeah. We're not going to walk the whole delivery tunnel. It is way too long. So maybe during the final tour. It's not particularly interesting. As you can see, it was mostly just concrete and lights on the walls, and that's pretty much it. So let's hop back up. Let's see if we can land. Perfect. We're getting better at this, guys. All right, we're gonna walk down to our left and we're gonna enter the salmon run. So first thing we see is our timber wolf habitat over on the right, but on the left we have, first of all, another signpost showing us where things are, but we have a height station. So this does have the other height station hidden behind it. I'm gonna have to move that over so that it's not showing. But the bear height is Drax off of the workshop. And here are some of the custom made decals. I did add a little eyeball to the salmon. It was looking a little bit weird without it, so. And I made these tiny fishes to go with it. And yeah, now we get our first look at our grizzly bear habitat. Oh, and our grizzly bear. Look at him go. Hello, Huckle. Hope you're having a good day. Seeing as someone shot you and you're now here. But we are taking good care of you. So breaking up that viewing area with that tree there. So now we get a good view of the tree forage feeder and then all of the various other bits and bobs that the bear has in here. Oh, he's making use of his cave. That's good. And then we do also have lights set up above to light up different areas of the habitat at night. And yeah, once we get over here, that is basically the edge of the bear habitat, and that is under construction. So we will be coming back here at some point in the future. We do have one more stop on today's tour though. I'm very happy with the way that building turned out. But anyway, one last stop on our tour, and you can kind of see it behind those rocks to the left. So we are just gonna hop on over there. Actually, one last thing before we head there. There's a bear statue I thought looked kind of cool, and I lit it up blue at night to kind of give it that water feel. And these conservation boards here will eventually have information about the salmon on them and how they are very important to the bears. Yeah. And then we can also see those floodlights lighting up certain parts, like the scratching post over there, and then the tree forage feeder, and so on. Okay, let's take a little nighttime walk because we didn't do that last time, and I did also light up the timber wolf habitat, so you can kind of see it on the right there. We will need some more lights along this pathway. I feel like it's not bright enough in certain spots. And then the watchtower up ahead is also nicely lit. But our last stop for today is actually this little building here, which I didn't show in the speed build. And it is a great gray owl aviary. We can actually see one of them just on that perch there. Oh, there we go. So that is a bird off of the workshop. That is one of Mealy's owls. And we don't actually have flying birds in game, so couldn't do that. But the speed build was getting long as it was, so this speed build will be a bonus episode this week, the Great Grey Owl Aviary, and we have a live stream coming up on Monday, so it'll also be a chance to talk about some of the speculations and information that Frontier gives us about the next DLC, so look forward to that video on Wednesday. I'm going to turn the lights back on real quick here. so that we can see the aviary during the day. Yeah. It does also have a little backstage, so we'll make our way over there. Staff only, but you guys can be staff. That's fine. So this tiny little staff area here just has transport cages, the door into the aviary, some tools, and then we do have one more owl in here. And all of the bird poop on the ground, too. So yeah, that, also a bear butt over there. So that is everything that we have done so far. And here's another nice view of Jasper, our female wolf. I am very happy with the way this is all coming together. Next week's episode, we are going to continue down this pathway over to where we see that massive habitat. But that is for next time. Thank you once again for joining me. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all of those fun things. This channel is at almost 900 subscribers, and I am so thankful for each and every one of you. See you next time. Bye.